Today we'll break down the fiery text animation that was inspired by the Fallout TV series. This title looks insane, and the quality of a burn-in effect is so good that it can literally be used in movies. And the best thing about this title is that the burn-in effect is fully procedural. This means that you'll be able to change the text and font, or even replace it with a logo, and all the animations will still work. So let's go! The composition is 4K, 24 FPS, and it's 9 seconds long. And now let's break it down layer by layer. We'll begin with the background. The background is a simple black solid, here it is, with the gradient ramp on top. This is a radial ramp that goes from the center to the edges. On the edges it's black, and in the center it's barely visible green color. And yes, it's causing a lot of bending, but we will not see it later on. The Z position of this layer is 4583, meaning that it's pushed back in the Z axis. Then goes the extra dirty glass texture. I've created it by myself many years ago. You can find a similar texture on Texture Labs or anywhere else on the internet. There are a lot of them. And this texture is also pushed back in the Z axis. The opacity of this texture is 30%. Here's how it looks without the texture and with the texture on top. And as you can see, we cannot see the bending anymore. Next goes the grid. The grid layer is a white solid, but I've added the grid effect on top with these settings. The position of the grid layer is the same as the dirt texture and the background, so it's pushed back. They're all right here. Then goes one more instance of extra dirty glass. But this time I've applied the mask to the very center, so that everything outside of this mask is dirty, but on the inside it's not. And the feather of this mask is 700 pixels. By the way, the blending mode of the grid is overlay, and the blending mode of this extra dirty texture is screen. The opacity is 28%, but the Z position is minus 234. Meaning it's pushed towards the camera. And as you can see on this animation, it's really close to the camera, and camera is like going through this hole made with the mask. It adds the volume to the whole scene. You can find the project file for this and all my other tutorials on my Patreon. Moreover, you'll find there all the motion graphics that you can see in my YouTube videos. If you liked any motion graphics that you've seen in my videos, it's there. Check it out at patreon.com/DenisZhilin. Next goes a very interesting part, a title. Title is a pre-comp of a title text composition and the explosion mask composition. Let's begin with the title text composition. Title text composition is a simple composition that contains a text. The composition settings is 3840 by 600. It's the very same 24 FPS, but it's a bit longer, no problem here. So this is basically a text layer that was pre-comped, like this. And I've changed the height to 600 pixels. That's it. The font of this text is Montserrat Black Italic, with the width of -20 and the height of 117. Next, I've added tint to this text. It makes it a little bit darker, and we need this gray color to make these black spots on the text. If the original text were white, these black spots would have been not black. They would have been like grayish or more to the white, and we need them to be black. So this text is gray. Then I've added roughen edges on top with the border 4.3, edge sharpness 0.88 and scale 51, complexity 2. And what's the most cool part? You can just type in everything that you want. For example, we have this text. All the effects work perfectly fine with any text that you'll put here. You can even change the font if you want to. It's all procedural. Once we've done with the text, let's go one level up. Here's the text, and we'll go to the explosion mask composition. This composition begins with the simple white solid with the round mask animated from the minimal scale to 100% or 180%. The main idea is that it grows from the simple point up to filling up all the screen. And I've smoothed out this growth for the mask path so that it looks like this. It begins a little bit faster and then slowly fills up all the screen. Here's how it looks. This animation is the base for our fire. All that's black over here, it doesn't have fire and it doesn't have text. So there is nothing in this blackness. But this spot, it brings fire on the edges and the text where the white is. You'll see it a little bit later. And now let's go to the explosion mask layer. We will come back to these two layers a little bit later. So as you can see, this layer is very interesting. It has the very same mask, but it goes a little bit slower than the background white spot. And it has this black and white texture. This is the fire. If we go to the main composition from here, without turning on these layers, and it's applied everywhere, to the edges of the text and to the very center of the text. And we want the fire only where the text appears on the edges. These two layers execute this very same function. They make the text and fire appear on the edges only. But for now, we'll take a look at how these spots are created. Let's turn everything off. So here is the fire. The fire is a fractal noise with these settings that I've changed. First of all, I've copied the mask from the explosion and pasted it here. Then, in the fractal noise, I've set the contrast to 784, brightness to 30, and complexity to 6, subscaling to 54.4, subrotation to 3 degrees. You can rotate it however you want. And I've applied the expression to the evolution. Alt-click on the stopwatch to open the expression menu, and type in here time multiplies 50. This means that every second the evolution will change by 50 degrees. Here's how it looks. And I've added the curves effect on top with this curve just to make the edges sharper. I wanted them to be really sharp. And this makes this text animation with the fire everywhere. So let's remove the fire from the center. We want the fire only on the edges. To do so, I have duplicated this explosion layer. Here it is. And I've applied the Luma matte to it. And this Luma matte goes from the explosion mask. And I've switched off the visibility of this mask. As you can see, it makes this mask appear on the edges only. And I've duplicated this explosion with the very same Luma matte applied to it to make it even more bright. This makes the text appear in the white spots, the fire appear in the white and dark spots, and all the dark background, the black background, it doesn't have neither the text nor the fire. And here's how it looks. There is no fire over here, where the white spot is. The fire is only on the edge, where this noise texture is. And on the outside, there is nothing. There's blackness. But how exactly does it work? As far as you remember, we have this title composition, where we can find the title text. I've just explained how this works. And we have the explosion mask composition. I've also just explained how it works. And inside of this text composition, we have applied the explosion mask to the text with the help of alpha matte. And as you can see, here's how the text appearing. It appears from the center where the white spot is, right here, the white spot, and the edges are torn. You can see these dark spots that are these spots, and it cuts out everything that's over here in the text. So it's a see-through, like this. You can see the text right here, but everything else is a see-through because of this mask composition. And it's spreading from the center to the edges. But as you can see, this title is invisible here. That's because I'm using it as a mask. Once again, it's an alpha matte to this foreground texture layer. And this layer is simply a layer with the texture, this one. And I wanted my text to be white, not black, like this. That's why I've applied the invert effect on top, and I've added the curves to make the text not as bright. This texture has the Z position of 0, and the blending mode is set to normal. As well as the title, it also has the Z position of 0. Now, the text animation looks like this. We don't have fire yet. Now it's turn to add the fire. The fire is the very same title composition. I've just duplicated it by pressing Ctrl D or Command D on Mac, and it has duplicated the title. but I've added a few effects on top. The fire composition is also different from the inside. If we open the fire composition, we will see the same compositions, explosion mask and title text. The first difference is that they have different track mattes. If the title composition had the explosion mask composition invisible and the title text composition visible with the alpha matte applied to it, in fire composition, we have the explosion mask composition visible instead. The title text is invisible and it plays the role as an alpha matte for the explosion mask composition. We are switching these mattes so that the quote-unquote fire does not spread beyond the title and stays right here in the limits of the title itself. The second difference is that the explosion mask composition has defined edges effect applied to it with the invert checkmark and blend with the original set to 19%. And I've also dropped the curves on top to make it more contrasty and bright. This way we've created this fire that's spreading from the inside of the title but is not getting beyond the title. So for now you can see that it glows with the red. It's not as bright and it doesn't resemble the fire that much, right? This is just the beginning. This is the base layer that glows almost like a fire. Here's how it looks without any effects. It has just a little bit of white edge. I've added the tint effect with the orange glow on top. Here's the color. Then I've added the curves to make this color pop. It's way more bright and it shifts to the red. Then I've added the glow. The first glow has the glow threshold of 26.3, glow radius of 20 and glow intensity 1. Then I've duplicated this glow to make it more intense. And on top, I've added the fastbox blur with the blur radius 20. I wanted to spread this red glow to the outside of the title. Then I've duplicated this fire composition and I've changed the settings a little bit to make the text a little more bright. So there is no tint over here, it only has curves to make the text brighter, it has fastbox blur to blur out the edges a little bit, and it has glow with a glow threshold of 26.3, glow radius 0.2 and glow intensity 1. Then I've duplicated this glow with the glow threshold 26.3, glow radius 4 and glow intensity 1. And what's really special that I did to this layer is I turned on for it to be as an adjustment layer, because if it's not an adjustment layer, it applies glow only to the edges. And I wanted to apply the glow to the whole text. That's why I've clicked here and now it applies to the text. The opacity of this layer is 40%. The blending mode of this and all the other fire layers is set to add. With this blending mode, we are only adding the bright spots on the top of our image. And the fire is bright. Then I've duplicated this fire layer once again. This time I've added the curves to make it a little bit brighter. Then I've added a tint with the red color. Here's the hex value of this color. Then I've added glow on top. This time its threshold is 47.8, glow radius 3 and glow intensity 3. It's way more intense and way more spread out than the previous glows. But the threshold is higher. This means that we are only getting the glow from the brightest spots. Then I've duplicated this glow with a glow threshold of 26.3, glow radius 50, it's really big radius, and glow intensity 1. And I wanted to blur it out too, so I've added the fastbox blur effect with a blur radius 4 and iterations 6. And by the way, the Z position of all the fire layers is 0. Let's switch on one more fire layer. So this fire instance is the same as the previous one, with the only difference: the fastbox blur is set to 2 instead of 4. This means that this instance of fire is not spreading out that much. Then I've duplicated this fire once again, but this time I've added orange tint on top. Here's how it looks without the tint. It's white. With the tint, it's more yellow. Then I've added the curves to make it more bright and prominent. And here's the glow 1. The glow threshold is 26.3, glow radius 0.2 and glow intensity 1. This glow is really tiny. It's located only on these brightest spots. Then goes the glow 2. This one has bigger glow radius, it spreads out more. And there is no fastbox blur, because we want these fire spots to be quite sharp. Next, what I did is I've duplicated this title layer and placed it above all the fire. and apply Defined Edges effect to it. Without Defined Edges, all the title is extremely bright, but Defined Edges effect makes it so that only the edges are bright and not the whole text. The blending mode of this layer is set to screen. Next is the radiation noise. It's a replication of a real-life effect. You can see these spots on a footage that was filmed next to the radiation source, like the one in Chernobyl or next to the active nuclear core on the nuclear power plants. To replicate this effect, I've created a white solid, then I've added a fractal noise on top. I've set the contrast to 470, brightness to 242, complexity 11.4. Then I've added the expression to the evolution. Time multiplies 3000. This means that it changes by 3000 degrees in 1 second. In essence, what it means is that every frame will be different. This frame differs from this frame, from this frame, from this frame, and so on. Each of the frames is different. Once again, to open the expression menu, Alt-click on the stopwatch, and then type in time multiplies 3000. And I've added the opacity animation to this layer. It begins with 0, and on 1 second and 20 frames, it's at 100. So it becomes stronger. The blending mode of this layer is set to screen. Oh, and I've added the inverse effect to inverse the color of these spots from black to white. Then goes a simple fade to black. It's a black solid with the opacity animation that goes from 0 to 100, the most basic fade to black. Then I've got 2 layers of pre-rendered grain to mimic film. You can create your own grain by going to Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and then in the Effects and Presets, type in Grain. Apply the Add Grain effect on top of your layer, set the viewing mode to final output, and then set the preset to Eastman Color Negative or any other that you like. I personally prefer this one. I've rendered this grain because it's way faster to apply it. I can just drag and drop it on top of my composition and set the blending mode to screen or overlay. And it also renders faster. As you can see, only this grain takes 1 second to render a single frame. So I'll delete it for me and turn on my grain. Not the my grain, but my grain. Next goes the blur wiggle. This is an adjustment layer with the fast box blur and a little secret that's connected to this blur. You can see 2 wiggle sliders over here, wiggle X and wiggle Y. To create these sliders, right-click, Expression Controls, Slider Control, and name the first slider control Wiggle X, then duplicate it and name it Wiggle Y. Why, will you ask me? Great question. Because we'll add the wiggle expression. To add this expression, Alt-click on this stopwatch. It will open you the expression menu, and here's what you have to put there. This expression will connect the wiggle frequency to this slider Wiggle X and the amount of wiggle to Wiggle Y slider. Hence, you will be able to control the wiggle with the sliders, and you will be able to create the keyframes for this wiggle. And here are the keyframes that I've added to this wiggle. It's 12:10, then it goes to 0, then again it's 0. It rapidly changes to 9:30, then back to 0. Here it's still 0, then goes to 11 and 7, meaning it wiggles 11 times per second for 7 pixels, and then it goes back to 0. Here I just repeat this pattern. It goes from 0 to 9:30, then back to 0. Then again, 0, higher value, 0, higher value right here, then back to 0. And again and again and again. Overall, it looks like this. Then I've added a vignette. It darkens the edges. Without the vignette it looks like this, and with the vignette it looks like this. I would even darken it more. Let's drag it over here and make it even more round. And let's darken it even more. Yeah, I like it better like this. Then goes the camera rig. To create this rig, go to Layer, New, Camera, create a camera, and then go to Layer, New, Null Object, and it will create a camera and a null object for you. Then make the null object 3D and then parent the camera to the null. This way you'll be able to control your camera with the help of a null object. Or you can create this whole rig with a single click of a single button of my free script. Create a camera rig. Simple as that. You can also create a vignette, like this. You just have to pull here and you've got your own dark vignette. You can find the script for free on my Patreon at patreon.com/DennisZhilin. In the camera controls layer, I've animated the camera. At the beginning of the animation, it has the Z position of 2220. Then it rapidly goes to 303.3 in just 1 second. And later on, it slowly zooms out to -163. Here's how it looks from the side. It begins right here, then it moves backwards really fast in 1 second, and then it goes back really slowly. What's more, I've added the wiggle to the anchor point. I've created the very same wiggle X and wiggle Y sliders, and I've linked them to the anchor point. Alt-click on the stopwatch, and in this expression menu, type in the very same expression that you've applied previously, with the wiggle X that controls the wiggle frequency and the wiggle Y that controls the wiggle value. And then I've just animated the wiggles. For the wiggle X, it always stays at 12. But wiggle Y, it has the value of 2 up to 1 second and 8th frame. Then it gradually goes down to 1 on 4th second and 14th frame. This means that the camera wiggles a lot in this range, but it gradually slows down to this range. Here it wiggles at 2 pixels 12 times a second, and here it wiggles only 1 pixel 12 times a second. Okay, so I've made a few little fixes to make this title look even better. Let's begin with the background, and I've replaced the background gradient, the green color, with this color on top and this color on bottom, that's just black. Here's how it looks like. And this gradient is animated from bright color, here's the value, and end color is this one. It's almost black, it goes more into the gray area. Then this color gradually changing to the dark one. Here's the start color, and here's the end color. It's just pure black. And it's slightly brown in the center. Then goes the grid. I've reduced its opacity to 47 and I've reduced the border to 3. So now it's barely visible, because when the background is bright, it's very visible. But then when it fades out to black, it's barely visible. I like it that way. Then I took this extra dirty glass and duplicated it to make it even more dirty. I've changed the position to 48. So I've pushed it back a little bit. You can see it here. Here's this layer, the second one. So the camera goes through more layers, meaning it adds a little bit more depth. As you can see, here is this layer that I've just duplicated. And here is the second layer. So we've just added a little bit more depth. Then I've duplicated this top fire layer, the one that was under the title. So I've just duplicated it. Hit Ctrl-D or Command-D to duplicate. And in this fire layer, I've added matte choker. And here's what it does. Without the matte choker, I have the same fire pattern as the layer below this one. Here's the layer below, and here's the layer above. They're basically the same. And what I have achieved with the matte choker is that I shrunk down the fire to the very center of these lines. It somewhat resembles the brightest spots in real life, the core of the fire. And I have removed the tint effect so that these spots are bright white. I've made the curve a little bit tighter so that the bottom part and the top part are closer together, and I've shrunk down the size of the glow. I've increased the glow threshold to 80, glow radius set to 2, glow intensity is 1. And I've duplicated this glow. The glow threshold is still 80, glow radius is 15 now, and glow intensity is 1. And what I have achieved with this layer is I've added the brightest spots right here. It looks a bit more natural. Then I've added a heat layer. This is a black solid with a turbulent noise applied to it. I've set the fractal type to dynamic, the contrast to 384, I've scaled it up to 342, and set the complexity to 2. Then Alt-click on the evolution stopwatch, and I've typed in time multiplies 100. This means that this heat will be moving with time. We need this layer as a base for our heat distortion that we will add at the beginning of the animation. To add this heat distortion effect, you can switch off the visibility of this heat layer, as it will work as a mask for the heat. To add the heat distortion, I've created an adjustment layer and I have placed it above the heat layer. I've applied the displacement map effect and I've set the heat layer as a displacement map layer, and also I've selected effects and masks, so that it will take values from the effect, not from the layer itself. Then I've switched use for horizontal displacement to luminance for both of these. And I've set the animation for the displacement values. On the 0 second it begins with 20, so that it looks very strong. And then on 4th second and the second frame it goes down to 0. Also, I have applied ease into these keyframes. It looks like this. Next, I've added Fire Sparks layer. This effect, it deserves its own tutorial because, well, it was way too difficult to create it in the first place. But don't worry, I will upload this footage to my Patreon and you will be able to download it for free. So, no problem here. And now the effects. So I've added the glow with the glow threshold of 60, glow radius 40 and glow intensity 1, but it's animated. The glow intensity goes from 0 in the beginning and then it goes up to 1 right here. I did it so that sparks do not glow that much in the beginning. Then I've added the curves effect to fade out the sparks. If you just fade them out through the opacity, it will look quite fake. It will look as if just these sparks have disappeared into nowhere. But with the curves, this fade out looks way more smooth. So first what I did is I've set the keyframe for the curves by clicking on this stopwatch. This is the beginning point. And the curves, they don't interpolate the keyframes like in a correct way. So you will have to make all the keyframes in between by yourself because, well, it looks like this. And to make it more gradual, you will just have to move the curves manually a few times. At first it looked like this, and the next keyframe it looked like this, then like this, and eventually it went down to this right bottom corner. So what I did is I was darkening the bright spots, which are on the top right, and the dark spots, which are on the bottom left. And as you can see, we are gradually removing the dark colors right here, while leaving a little bit of the bright ones. So at the end, only the brightest colors will appear. After the sparks are ready, let's move on to the bottom light. Bottom light layer is a duplicated background, but with a slightly changed settings. So here's how it looks. It's just the light that moves on the bottom from left to right. The start color looks like this. The end color is just black. And I've set the keyframe for the start ramp on this position, and I've moved it somewhat to the center on the second and the 5th frame. Also, by default, it was way too bright. So I've also added the curves and animated it, because I wanted the light to be brighter in the beginning and not as bright at the end, but without changing the color. And in the first keyframe it looks like this, and on the last keyframe it looks like this. It's just slightly dimmer. Also, I've set the blending mode to add. By the way, as well as the Fire Sparks layer, it's also in the add blending mode. Then I've duplicated this bottom light layer, and this is how I've created the top light layer. The colors are just black and white. The curve at the beginning looks just like the curve from the bottom light layer, but I made the animation shorter, and in the end it looks like this. And also the end ramp position is this one. So basically it's just a bright white light that dims down. Like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you want to see more videos like this one. And check out my Patreon page for the project files and motion graphics from my YouTube videos. Also, you might like this video, so go check it out.